really pleased to have Neill Mulvie with us. He's coming to us from Stirling, and we thought we would connect with Neill as a member of the much talked about, perhaps little known, Highland Society of London, the sponsors for a very long time of the gold medals for Pembroke at the Argyllshire Gathering and the Northern Meeting. And this year, the Argyllshire Gathering marks 150 years of the Highland Society of London sponsoring the gold medal. So, Neill, thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
No, glad to be here, Andrew.
Why don't we start with the basics? What is the Highland Society of London all about?
Well, the Highland Society of London was formed 1781 or thereby in London. There was a similar society in Scotland. It was essentially, William Donaldson describes it as a patrician society, by which he means that these people came from the upper classes, the landed gentry of Scotland, based in London. It had the aims at that time to preserve the culture of Scotland, and a subsidiary aim to try and get a repeal of the Disarming Act, which had occurred as a result of the 45 Rebellion. And the third issue that concerned the society at its foundation was the return of confiscated lands to those people who participated in the 45. And they managed to achieve the return of forfeited lands in about, I think, 1782 or thereby, something like that. So those are the aims. But today it's really focused on the preservation of Scottish culture, not so much Gaelic as it used to be, and they've widened their activities to arts in general as they're performed in the Highlands.
Yeah, interesting. And about how many people are members of the Highland Society of
London?
I'm
not sure the exact numbers, but it's around about 300. It's a few hundred anyway. Not all participate regularly, but as far as the society is concerned, they meet about 4 times a year for dinner or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then, what the question, you talked about the aims of the organization, the society now, but originally if we go back to the sponsorship of the Argyllshire Gathering gold medal, how did the organization get involved, and why did it get involved specifically with the Argyllshire Gathering and I guess the Northern Meeting as well?
Well, the sponsorship of piping competitions is compatible with their aim of preserving Scottish culture and music, or particularly as piping. Is one aspect of it. Now, how they got involved with the gathering in Inverness the meeting in Inverness and the gathering in Oban is not absolutely clear. But my own suspicion is that, as I said earlier, it's a patrician society, or it was very much so at the time of foundation, and these people would all be connected. The same with the Northern Meeting. It was run really by the gentry, and the same with Oban. And for example, you go to the Oban Games now, there is a tent specifically for what a friend of mine, Graham Richardson, used to call landless lairds, from which the plebs such as you and I, Andrew, are excluded. So I think it would be a result of networking and contacts that these people have. It's like everything else in this world. It depends who you know and what influence you've got over groups of people. So I suspect that's what happened. And the gold medal was, one guy in Oban would say to his pal in London, how about sponsoring this competition? And it would occur that way or something like that. Yeah. I have no proof of that, but that's my general view of the way it happened.
And interesting, I believe the Highland Society of London goes back to the Falkirk Tryst in the 1700s. Kind of interesting that such a patrician society would be interested in sponsoring a non-patrician competitions.
Well, that's right. I mean, as you know, the British system, or the British caste system, which is now beginning to disappear to some extent, has always been one of division, where, for example, in cricket, you had players and gentlemen. And in piping, you had professional, non-professional pipers. So, for example, the Royal Scottish Piper Society was, at one time, essentially players and non-players. It's not quite true, but it was a class thing. I'm not complaining about that. It's just the way the world was in those days. But the key thing is, I think there were a group of people in London and in Scotland with the Highland Society of Scotland who were interested in trying to preserve Scottish culture and language and arts. And the way in which they could do that was through sponsorship of competition. The point has to be made, actually, that neither of these Highland societies actually ran the competitions. They just sponsored them. So, for example, the Falkirk Tryst was run on behalf of the organisation by the Gaelic Society of Glasgow.
And to this day, obviously, the Highland Society of London still sponsors both of the prestigious gold medals and other events. We look at the Sky Gathering or the Sky Highland Games.
And the MacGregor Memorial, for example, they've just recently got involved. There's going to be a recital at Pembroke in London, organised by a chap called Gordon Toogan-Jones, who's a member of what's called the Pinstripe Highlanders, which is another group of non-competing pipers in London. They're organising a recital, and the Highland Society of London is involved in sponsoring that too. But it's not just piping. They, for example, also sponsor at the National Mod the prize for Gaelic literature. They sponsor also a prize for the Gaelic Singer of the Year. So that their activities are quite wide-ranging, and they've offered support, for example, to country museums in Scotland and so forth.
Anything more to add before we wrap up here?
No, I think that's more or less covered it. But it's I don't think it's ever going to stop in terms of sponsorship from the Highland Society of London. I mean, they regard it as a almost religious fervour, their support for these medals, because they are highly prestigious. As you know, most pipers aim to try to win the gold medal if at all possible, and I think the Highland Society feel quite proud that they do that. That's my impression. I'm actually a director of the Highland Society of London, and I know in the discussions there's been a phenomenal amount of enthusiasm for these events and the other things they support as well.
Well, it's certainly one of the great traditions of solo piping competition in the world, and the Highland Society of London is synonymous with the two biggest prizes in competitive piping, and long may it continue. I think pipers everywhere thank the Highland Society of London for its support, not just this year, but for the last 150 plus years. So thanks very much. Long may it continue.